Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to Michael Brown Unplugged. We're going to start off today, instead of putting Christian at the end of the podcast, we're going to put Christian at the beginning of the podcast. Welcome, Mr. Toto.
This is like a promotion.
It is.
And with a promotion comes maybe a new title, maybe monetary compensation, maybe gifts, perchance.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the most insincere yes I've ever heard.
So let's get the particulars out of the way. If you want to follow Christian, and you really should, he's on Twitter at HollywoodandToto, T-O-T-O, or you can go to his website, HollywoodandToto.com. And I really suggest that you do that. So can we be honest with the listeners this morning?
We're all about transparency here.
Absolutely. So yesterday, I saw a clip. I listened to it, and I said, no, I'm not going to use it. I'm going to wait for Christian.
You're so faithful.
I am. And then you send me a text message. Hey, by the way, all I saw was Joy Behar, global warming, Biden, curing cancer. Can you grab that audio? You haven't even heard it.
I just was scrambling before we started recording the show. I said, we can't skip this. This could be the greatest clip of all time. And I haven't heard it yet because I wanted to get it to you as quickly as possible, and I wanted to make sure we had this. But I am going into this completely raw, but my expectations are sky high.
All right. So logistically, do you want to play the entire thing through once, or do you want to do our typical raise our hands and color commentary as we go?
I've got to do the hand raise today. Okay. So you play it, and if you obviously if you see something you want to stop, you do it. But my hand will shoot up if I need to stop this.
Well, since I've heard it, get your hand ready.
I'm loosening it up.
That's right.
I'm stretching,
and in 3, 2, 1.
Can I just say one more thing on health, Vice President?
I'm sorry, we're not very professional today. I should set this up by saying that it starts out with Meghan McCain talking about cancer, because as we all know, her father died of brain cancer. Mm-hmm. So this first voice you hear is Meghan McCain.
Can I just say one more thing on health? Vice President Biden says he's going to promise to cure cancer if elected. It's one of his big promises. And he said you're going to see the single most important thing that changes America. We're going to cure cancer. He already had a big...
Right away.
13 seconds.
This has nothing to do with The View.
13 seconds.
The fact that a Joe Biden, someone of his caliber, former vice president running for the presidency, says something this dumb, this pandering, this ridiculous, and every late night show in the country is not mocking it incessantly. Not, of course, curing cancer, which is obviously one of the most noble goals you can possibly have, but making this sort of ridiculous pledge with no basis in anything is just an absolute condemnation of our current satire nation.
Oh, you are.
Is that fair to say?
No, you are so wrong. You are so wrong.
I'm so wrong.
Because here's the problem. There are laboratories, hospitals, clinics, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. And all they're doing is they're focusing on hay fever. They're focusing on ingrown toenails. There is nobody that's focusing on trying to cure cancer. So,
jock itch, too. Don't forget that.
And jock itch, right. And just this rash I have over here. Uh-huh. And it takes leadership, like the former vice president, who, if I recall correctly, said they were going to cure cancer during the Obama administration. But I might just be, dreaming that.
Yeah.
But there's not a lab in the world that has thought about trying to cure cancer. And so all the vice president is doing, the former vice president, is waking up all of those men and women in the white gowns and saying, quit focusing on, hay fever, and focus on cancer. So I don't know why I don't know why you have to be such a downer about this.
My only worry about this pledge, which is rock solid, is that what if he flip-flops on it? What if he goes pro-cancer? I mean, he's been flip-flopping so religiously the last week and a half, he could go pro-cancer. So let's just hope he stays on course with the curing cancer. He's got my vote already. That's a lock. Move on.
I could tell when I dialed you up to start recording that you were in kind of a foul mood today.
Oh, I'm in a horrible mood.
and that foul mood is coming through loud and clear. Toto, they want to cure cancer. I
know. I'm terrible. I'm a horrible human being.
Okay, so 13 seconds in, Meghan McCain is concerned. She's proud that Joe Biden has mentioned cancer and
that he helped the government fund for brain cancer. And I think this should be at the forefront of a platform in every way. I don't know why curing cancer hasn't been.
Well, to that statement, I would say that curing cancer is going to be much more difficult when there's so much climate change and pollutants in the environment, because a lot of cancer is environmentally caused. And this president rolls back anything that will clean the air.
I'm sorry.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm going to stop.
It's worse than I thought.
I'm going to stop it for you.
Thank you.
You can't see. I'm watching Christian on Skype. And Christian just put his head in both of his hands and just put his head down on the microphone.
I'm out. This is the viewiest view. And by the way, can we just say, and I hate to introduce some facts into the situation, when we talk about pollution, we talk about climate change, we talk about carbon emissions, the fact that people specifically look at the U.S. as if we controlled the globe and there was no China and there was no India and there were no other nations that were cranking out all this stuff, as if one presidential decree is going to flick a switch and say, we got it, we're good, climate change is solved. Ignoring the fact that even if we shut down as a nation, there's old China and India over there cranking out a lot of bad stuff. And that's assuming you believe in all the doom and gloom. It's such a dishonest conversation. I'm staggered by that. How could you have a conversation and say, oh, yeah, and by the way, I'm ignoring all of this because I want to focus on this. And then there's the whole Paris Accord where all the nations that happily signed on are not meeting their requirements, while I believe the U.S. is actually reducing emissions. I may be wrong about that, but that should be looked into too.
Are you done?
No, I'm not, but you should. It's your show, so you should probably continue.
Well, while you were on that mini tirade, just because I love you like a brother, and because I can see on the clip where Joy starts talking, I've backed it up just for you.
Thank you.
I would say that curing cancer is going to be much more difficult when there's so much climate change and pollutants in the environment, because a lot of cancer is environmentally caused. And this
Dr. Behar.
President rolls back anything that will clean the air.
Wait. I'm fairly politically astute, and I do try to keep up with, like, the deregulations and the policies and the executive orders and the statutes. Can you tell me what he's rolled back that's increasing air pollution?
I don't know specifically. It's possible there may be a few things. I don't know specifically, but I retreat to my previous rant.
They're working against each other if they don't also clean up the emissions.
If they don't know what causes brain cancer, for whatever it's worth.
Wait a minute. Meghan McCain, whose father just died of brain cancer, just handed Dr. Behar her diploma and said, for what it's worth, nobody knows what causes brain cancer. I don't know that. I mean, I'm sure that over the span of her father being diagnosed and eventually dying of brain cancer, that the entire family talked to numerous oncologists about the causes of brain cancer and, what can we do? So
Yeah.
I wouldn't call her necessarily a subject matter expert, but I would say she has standing to talk about the issue of brain cancer and what causes or doesn't cause it, versus Joy Behar, who just thinks that, I guess, you driving your SUV is giving people brain cancer.
You know who's more coherent than Joy Behar? Remember that, was it a Miss America or Miss USA pageant where she said, I want to go to the Iraq, and I think that she was more coherent than Dr. Behar. Sorry, I need to include her full title.
Say that I do think you can't meet anyone who hasn't been impacted by cancer. And I actually think putting that out on the campaign trail is something, at least for me, has been very resonative, and so I like it.
And I think that's why, if you poll Americans, healthcare is also one of the number one concern.
This is so stupid. This is so stupid. They're just saying, mentioning the word cancer is doing these wonderful things as if no one has thought about curing cancer, researching cancer cures, or doing anything about the situation. It is such spin that a moron presidential candidate comes out and says, I'm going to cure cancer. And instead of everyone laughing at him and saying, that's ridiculous, this is the spin they're putting on it. And Meghan McCain, who apparently loves Joe Biden, is jumping in and giving him all the credit in the world for the most pandering thing you could possibly say, besides, I'm going to give everyone a puppy. I'm going to give everyone a puppy. I'm going to give everyone $1,000 a month, which I think Mr. Yang has already mentioned, and I'm going to cure cancer. It is unbelievably pandering and dumb, and the most crass kind of political commentary. And we're sitting here taking it seriously, not making fun of it, and giving the polite golf clap. I'm amazed. And yes, I'm still angry.
I love it. I love it. And, of course, the other part I love about this particular, we've now transitioned to, is it Sunny? Sunny Hostin?
Yeah, I refuse to learn her last name.
Yeah, so anyway, so Sunny, I like how the announcement that we're going to cure cancer only if we elect Joe Biden,
right,
then leads to the logical conclusion that what we need is socialized medicine, nationalized health care, because that's exactly where she went. She didn't waste any time going to that point.
Healthcare is also one of the number one.
Oh, the seals are ready.
Oh, they are. If we just had socialized medicine, we wouldn't have any diseases.
No.
I mean, look at all the countries that do. I mean, they're disease free.
It's amazing.
Cuba. Everybody goes to Cuba, right?
They live to be 152 on average.
On average, right.
And those people are the ones who die in car accidents.
No, actually, the only thing that lives to be 152 in Cuba are the cars.
I think that anytime someone says, it is my goal to make this happen, sometimes we get very like, oh, yeah, okay, sure. And, I think that makes people not want to do things, not want to take the step to try and see if things can be done. And I think of Madame Curie. I think to all of the great scientists who...
I thought for a second that she was going to have an ounce of wisdom to share. I swear to God, I thought Whoopi was riding into the rescue. And then she's continuing the fake notion that no one is looking to cure cancer. They're waiting for Joe Biden to give the starter's pistol. I can't believe it. These are grown women sitting at a table saying these things. I'm flabbergasted. We've been doing this for years. I can't believe what I'm hearing. I'm stunned.
I love the fact that Whoopi's argument is all those people I joked about in the labs that are doing other things have now been challenged. And so now because of the challenge and somebody somewhere saying, well, yeah, you can't cure cancer. You're crazy to say that. Oh, well, then let me show you.
That's right.
I'm just going to go do it now.
I was going to cure cat scratch fever. Now, cancer.
I wish I had cat scratch fever up to play. Oh.
And you know what? I know this sounds crazy, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So you know what, Joe? If you can get us to the point where we can eradicate cancer, that would be fantastic. I would love that. But you know what it is time for right now, Sonny?
Break.
Yes.
It's time for you to do the Pride Month FYI.
Yes, and I love this. I love that we're doing this. Today's Pride.
Oh. Yeah.
That was the worst commentary in the history of TV, followed up by the worst segue in the history of TV.
Right. Cancer, it's our pride moment of the. Oh. I think our work is
I'm
done.
out. I don't know what to do.
Our work is done here, I think.
And also, once you've reached peak view, what's next? And Meghan McCain, she's our lifeline. She's the one who's supposed to be grounded and smart and thoughtful and offering something that's different than the other hosts. And she failed us.
She failed.
Meghan McCain just despises Trump, and I get the context there.
Look, she despises Trump, and she fell into the whole emotional thing about somebody's talking about cancer.
Right.
And somebody wants, look, whoever said, maybe it was Meghan or somebody made the comment that there's virtually no one whose life hasn't been touched by somebody that has cancer.
Of course.
True statement. We all want a cure for cancer, and I think most people in their deep, darkest thoughts fear cancer. Nobody wants to get cancer of any sort, even a curable cancer, breast cancer or prostate cancer. Nobody wants to get any of those things. Nobody. But to sit here and in a political season and take a guy that says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cure cancer. If you, and to be very specific, if you elect me, we're going to cure cancer. That is a horrible statement to make for people who are desperate. And I use Meghan McCain as an example. Even though her father died, she is nonetheless desperate for a cure because she saw, if you've ever seen, I watched Tamara's mother literally die of lung cancer. If you've ever seen that, you want a cure for cancer. You don't want anybody, you don't want your worst enemy to die like that. But to do that in a political setting and say, elect me and I'm going to cure cancer. Well, you know, Joe, why didn't you do it in the 8 years when you were vice president?
That's a question that no journalist today will ask him. None. And that's the first question you ask him. And you know, the second thing is, if Donald Trump had gone on the stump and said, I'm going to cure cancer if you reelect me, it would be a 2-week news cycle with every cancer expert, every cancer victim, every cancer family member, survivor being called out to denounce what he said. It may have lasted, it may go a month. And yet Joe Biden, just one fleeting news cycle, and people like us get to kind of call it out, and that's it. It's staggering, you know, and we're sort of walking the line between mocking it and getting really angry. And that's probably maybe the best approach because it is insulting. It's truly insulting. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, but it's going to get much worse when the campaign goes on. That's for sure.
I can't stop thinking about there's some poor woman suffering from breast cancer watching The View and listening to that and thinking, now, I think most of the women I know would watch it and mock it the way we have. But I also know there are a lot of women that would watch this. And I'm only picking on women because I'm using breast cancer as an example and because it's The View. I assume that The View's audience is predominantly female. How horrible to give them any sense. Look, it's one thing for a doctor, an oncologist. You're at a cancer center. You're getting treatment. For an oncologist to say to you, look, I know of a experimental therapy that if I send you to Timbuktu, you know, it might do something. Listening to a television show and getting hope from these yahoos or from Joe Biden about curing cancer is just despicable.
It really is.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think we've said what needs to be said about that particular clip. It was as bad as I thought. I think maybe even a little worse.
Okay. What do you want to do next?
Let's shift gear. You know, I want to talk a little bit. You know, we don't do many movie reviews in the show, and I've never gotten the sense that you're a horror fan. Is that true? Like horror movies?
It's not that I'm not a fan. It's just that I usually go because either the grandkids want to go or Tamara wants to go. So I go, and while I'm there, I enjoy it. But I don't I don't seek them out.
Gotcha. Well, this one is kind of a curiosity. It's called The Dead Don't Die.
You know me way too well.
That's right.
It's kind of scary.
You know, it's funny. When I was, I guess, in my early 20s, I worked at a video store, VHS. That's how old I am. And I was pretty good at getting a sense of my customers. Like, I knew that Mrs. Sheehan, she liked more critically acclaimed films. I know that other customers liked rock'em sock'em action movies, kind of brain dead stuff, which I love too. So I'm not judging. So I think I can sense what you like and dislike. But The Dead Don't Die comes out this weekend. It was shown at the Cannes Film Festival, and it's got an amazing cast. It's got Bill Murray, Tilda Swinton, Iggy Pop, Adam Driver, Carol Kane. I mean, just a lot of really talented, famous people, kind of quirky people as well. And it's about a town taken over by zombies. And it's from a very hipster director. And so it's a horror comedy hybrid, which is one of my favorite things. Because when you get it right, it's great. My kids and I will watch Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein again and again. We just love it.
Of course.
So given hipster indie director, you've got the great cast, you've got the horror comedy. It is horrible. Horrible.
Oh,
Not
seriously?
Scary.
I thought you were going to tell me this was a fantastic movie.
I couldn't wait to see it. I was very excited to see it. I saw it a few weeks ago at a preview screening, but it is out this weekend. It's really bad. And it is clumsy, and it's a very droll, deadpan style of humor, which could be great. But when the wit isn't there and the script is lacking, it really stands out as being terrible. So you've got Bill Murray and Adam Driver doing kind of shtick, and they're both underwhelmed by the zombie apocalypse. They don't seem to be bothered by it too much, but it's just – it lays there. It is terrible. But I want to kind of talk about one other factor before scaring people away from it. It's an anti-Trump movie as well, and it's an anti-fracking movie.
No, tell me it ain't so, Joe. Come on.
Yeah, no, listen. Zombie movies are often used for political commentary. Back in the 60s, Night of the Living Dead was talking about racism as a classic end scene of that movie. Sorry, spoiler alert, but it's 50-plus years old, where the black hero is shot and killed just almost randomly by someone who may have some racist implications, where he sees a body, thinks it's a zombie, and just takes him out. So it was a very clever way of where he kind of the director, George Romero, would weave in themes about racism and culture. And it was very smart. And he's done that again and again. In this movie, the preaching is so heavy and so obnoxious and so dense that my buddy sitting next to me, who's pretty liberal, he said, "Do you want me to explain it all to you?" Which gave me the biggest laugh of the entire movie experience, which is pretty sad. So there's one character played by Steve Buscemi, a great actor, and he's wearing a hat, a red MAGA hat, but it didn't say "Make America Great Again." It says "Make America White Again." Because you see, he's a racist because he likes Trump. So it's that level of political commentary on top of it's a very dull, boring movie with few laughs and no scares. So that's my warning. We don't do a lot of horror movie or even movie reviews here, but I thought I'd make an exception on that one.
So in your and you can read the story about it on Christian's website, hollywoodandtoto.com. Explain to me, because you say in your story, we're dropped into the tiny eastern town of Centerville, where, and you have it in quotation marks, the phrase "polar fracking" has turned night into day. Polar fracking?
I think the combined term polar fracking might have been the creation of the filmmaker. But it is about fracking, and it's sort of an environmental, like we're hurting the planet kind of a thing. So
were they fracking natural gas, or were they fracking the sun?
They don't talk about – I think it was more for gas, I'm guessing. But they don't go into the scientific specifics of it. It's just more like it's in the background. We hear it on the local news.
Because we need to denigrate fracking.
Exactly.
Even though polar fracking is a figment of somebody's imagination.
Right.
Or maybe the secret government has some fracking going on the sun.
Maybe this is the first glimpse of polar fracking. Yeah. But the point is that it's an obvious attack on fracking. Again, fine, you want to make a statement, but it's so clumsily done here, and it's so repetitive, and it's just part of this fabric of we're so smart and we're so enlightened, we're going to make fun of you rubes for liking Trump and liking your free gas or cheap gas. it's just, and listen, I can put all that aside and say, hey, the movie was great, except it isn't. It's terrible. So it's a clean sweep.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so now can we move on to something? I'd like to hear your comment, and not that I didn't want to hear all of your other commentary, which of course that I did. But you sent me a story. I have not read the story, just like you didn't listen to the Behar clip. I deliberately did not read this story because it is one of the ABC drama series that, as you know, Tamara and I were so excited about. And we watched 2 or 3 episodes. And then I took the 12 gauge and shot the television.
That's right.
And it's ABC's Designated Survivor. Now, real quickly, a designated survivor is when there's a State of the Union speech or a joint speech to Congress, a member of the cabinet is the designated survivor. And they go to an undisclosed location, Mount Weather, Virginia. They go to this undisclosed location where they are kept safe in case somebody decides to blow up the Capitol and try to decapitate the government. It would have been a fantastic storyline. And so we were enthralled with the first 2 or 3 episodes because I was thinking, having been in charge of that program, of all of the different avenues you could take. This is a multi-year series that can take off on domestic terrorism, international terrorism, just any number of things about what happens when the government has to go into those continuity of government programs. And then suddenly it turned into an anti-gun show. I mean, literally an anti-gun show.
And then the ratings weren't strong enough, so ABC canceled it, but Netflix rode into the rescue. And I believe we're in season 3. I hope I'm right about that, but I think that's where we are. So I think the new season as it stands right now came out on Netflix. And Netflix and other streaming services, sometimes they do this, where they say they see a show, they go, well, it was canceled, but I think there's a big enough audience where if we can kind of take it over, we can put out new episodes. They did with Longmire, too.
Now, does it still
like when Netflix does that.
Is Kiefer Sutherland still in it?
Yeah.
He's
a star.
Okay.
So good for Netflix for doing that. But that leftward turn you saw, it's gotten a little more dramatic.
Oh, good. Then you know what? Maybe tonight, since Tamara's still gone, I'm on Netflix watching Designated Survivor, and I'm shooting the other television.
That's right. Target practice time. So the headline that got me on Newsbusters, it says that thoughtful, compassionate conservatives are like unicorns. And this is part of the show dialogue. And it goes on to kind of describe some of the elements of the show, some of the conversations on the show. And I thought, my goodness golly, is there one conservative on the cast, the crew, the writing team, the production team? Or if so, are they so amazingly scared they would never, ever raise a hand and say, half the country is conservative and maybe some of that group isn't quite like you described, but clearly that's not happening, or they're so scared they wouldn't even dare peep up. But it's just staggering what's going on. And I have to say, I love Netflix. I subscribe to Netflix. I think they make some great content. I think they're an amazing company.
Same here.
I could spend an hour talking about how wonderful the service is and how much I've enjoyed it. They're taking a pretty hard left turn in recent months. They're signing up Barack Obama. I think Susan Rice is on the board, show after show after show with hard left views, almost no right-of-center content, almost no even mid-center content from a political point of view. I'm just aghast at it. And I think at some point the country loves Netflix and chill is going to be replaced by I'm signing off. Now, they've also gotten political with the abortion issue and the Georgia situation. And so that sort of the head people at the top of the company are saying we may pull our productions out of there, including Ozark, the show with Jason Bateman. So I think all of these things are really going to create some brand damage to Netflix, because up until now, I think it's been kind of a universally loved company where, hey, it's cheap, it's reasonably accessible, it's got great content, I can watch old movies, new stuff. I mean, it had everything going from a brand, and I think that they're really going to hurt themselves.
So have we reached the point where you and I can now conclude that the media has been taken over by the lefties, and any content that is moderate or right of center is now considered fringe content.
Yeah. And that's why you're seeing things like the Gosnell movie where they had to do a crowdfunding campaign. They had to go through an independent distributor. You've got to work around the system. Hollywood in general has gotten so politicized and so angry and so emotionally driven in its stories that you're not going to see characters who are right of center, who are good and kind and decent. I think that's going to happen less and less. And I think you get more stories hitting you over the head with their messages from the left. And across the spectrum, I just think that there's a hardening of hearts within Hollywood. And I don't know if you and I talked about it. There was a story about how there were different scripts floating around Hollywood about Matt Drudge and about Andrew Breitbart. Did we talk about that?
Yeah.
And how they couldn't bear to think of depicting those two figures in anything resembling a positive light. And I think that's what's happening in the creative process, where years ago – actually, I had a colleague at my website wrote a story about interesting, eclectic, conservative characters in big screen movies. And he mentioned a movie called, it was with Philip Seymour Hoffman, Flawless, where his character was, I think, like a drag performer, but he was a Republican. So it was sort of an atypical, sympathetic portrayal of a Republican in a way that you didn't expect. It wasn't a typical white male with a starched collar. It was a flamboyant person, and yet he was treated with respect. And I think those characters, as rare as they are, I think they're going to disappear entirely.
Well, that's a sad commentary.
Yeah, and I think you're losing rich storytelling as a result.
Yeah.
So, Designated Survivor, new season's out as of June 7th. Okay,
well, another thing for me to avoid.
If you want to be insulted directly to your face while at home.
Oh, Lord. Okay, well, Mr. Hollywood in Toto, thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. This has been my therapy.
Yeah. Don't forget to follow Christian on Twitter at Hollywood in Toto, and get to the website hollywoodintoto.com. Will you come back next week?
After my yoga, after I do a kind of a day's worth of silence where I just don't hear any voices, yes, I will be back.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Hang on, everybody. I got a few things to say. Don't go away. Moving on, in a story that is almost as dumb as what we've just listened to in terms of The View, I want you to imagine yourself that you're isolated in some brutal wilderness. You're huddled beside this campfire that's just beginning to dwindle. And all around you are the menacing faces of wolves that are drawing closer. The fire begins to die even more. It gets smaller and smaller, and the darkness closes in. You know, that's kind of the feeling I get when I start reading the news. Let me tell you a story about Memphis, Tennessee. Night before last, an angry mob faced off with U.S. Marshals after a black criminal got himself shot. People in the crowd threw rocks and bricks, according to the story, with 25 officers suffering mostly minor injuries during the tense clash Wednesday night in the Fraser community in North Memphis. Officers cordoned off several blocks near the scene. By 11 p.m., officers had used tear gas. Most of the crowd had dispersed, according to Michael Rawlings in a press conference yesterday morning. But there's still just enough of that fire left to wave a burning branch and to frighten the wolves into backing off a few steps, if only temporarily. Do you remember this story? Here's how 20-year-old Brandon Weber forced the marshals to shoot him. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation spokeswoman Kelly McAllister said the Gulf Coast Regional Fugitive Task Force went to a Fraser home to look for a suspect that had felony warrants. Marshals saw the man get into a vehicle and then proceed to ram the task force vehicles several times before exiting with a weapon. That's when the marshals opened fire, killing the man who died at the scene. You know, if you're going to ram, remember this taxpayer relief shot? If you're going to ram U.S. Marshals or sheriff's office or Popo or anybody else, if you're going to ram their cars with your car, that's a felony. That's assault and battery with a deadly weapon. You can commit vehicular homicide. We have a truck driver who's since been bonded out, who came here from Cuba, got hired by a trucking company in Houston. I don't know if he could read English or not. But for those of you who don't live in Colorado, as you come eastbound down I-70 out of the mountains, it's a very steep grade. And all the way down the mountain are these runaway truck ramps, so that 18-wheelers who lose their brakes or who lose control are able to steer themselves into these truck ramps that are heavy sand. So as your truck goes up the ramp, the sand, and the wheels dig into the sand, and it brings your truck to a stop. Now, I've heard different figures that it costs $30,000, $40,000 or something to then retrieve your truck off the truck ramp and get it taken care of. But here's a yahoo talking about vehicular homicide. Here's a yahoo that I doubt has ever driven in the mountains. He's driving down. His truck loses control. He passes at least 2, if not 3, of these runaway truck ramps. Out of control, finally gets down to the flatlands just on the far west edge of Denver. Kills people. Destroys the interstate. Interstate 70, both directions, is shut down. A major thoroughfare going across the country. Shut down for several days while they try to do the repairs, check the bridges, clear the debris of I forget how many, 30, 40 vehicles involved in this accident. And he kills people. And one of the charges that he faces is vehicular homicide. He unlawfully killed somebody with a vehicle. If you start ramming somebody's, particularly a cop's car, with your own vehicle, and then you jump out of the vehicle and you point a weapon in the direction of the officers, they have a legitimate right of self-defense to shoot and kill you, which is what they did. But here's the rest of the story. Lefty politicians never miss the opportunity to side with a violent criminal against civilization and to find a way to egg on the mob. Shelby County Commissioner, I think they pronounce it Shelby. It's spelled Shelby, but I think in Tennessee I think they pronounce it Shelby. Shelby County Commissioner mayoral candidate Tammy Sawyer demagogically tweeted, "Every life lost should matter. Every single one. How many times will this be okay? It cannot continue to be." What cannot continue to be? What officers trying to enforce the law? Officers trying to execute warrants against a felon? Is that what she says can't continue? Or is it that she wants that to stop? And she doesn't give a rat's ass about a thug using his car to try to run down cops and then jumping out of the car and point a gun at the cops, and the cops rightly, lawfully, and morally defend themselves, shoot the thug dead, and what? The Marxist leftist mayor comes out and says that's got to stop. I think the lives that are lost to criminals are irrelevant and immaterial to these Marxist politicians. Only the criminal lives matter. Their ideology is that darkness that is closing in on the campfire of civilization. The story out of Memphis continues that police cars in a nearby fire station were damaged. 6 of the injured officers had to be treated at a hospital. The mayor tweeted, "I'm impressed by their professionalism and incredible restraint as they endured concrete rocks being thrown at them and people spitting at them." That's the current mayor, Jim Strickland, not the candidate, Tammy Sawyer. This is the dumbassery that just continues to drive me nuts in this country. We can talk about losing the civilization and the culture. And we can talk about, just like Christian and I just talked about, the dumbassery that goes on with The View, that goes on in movies and Hollywood. We can talk about all of that, and that's legitimate, that's real, and it is caustic to the culture, and it's destroying the country. But I think even more so is the ideology of the Marxist left that sides with the criminals. And look, cops make mistakes. Cops sometimes do the wrong thing. Not every cop killing is justified. And when it's not, there is a system, a judicial system, that will hold them accountable. And if it doesn't, that's because we don't have a perfect system, but we have a system better than all other systems in the world. And I'm not saying that our system can't be improved, but we certainly shouldn't throw this system out because in Memphis, cops defended themselves against a thug that was trying to kill them, and the response to that lawful shooting are riots? That's the debasement of the culture that I think is going to destroy the country. In other news, if you haven't heard, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter have been on this blitzkrieg of deplatforming people. Now, if you don't know what deplatforming means, people on, and I haven't monetized either this podcast or my YouTube channel yet, although I probably will do that in the future, either use a subscription model or do very small, quick, unobtrusive advertising. Don't let that turn you off, but, you got to make a living, right? Well, anyway, deplatforming is the method by which YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter keep people from making money on the platforms, either through subscriptions or through advertising. And everybody on the right side of the political spectrum is all upset about that. And I don't blame them. They should be. But I think they're missing a larger point. Now, as part of this ongoing blitzkrieg, these Marxists who run Google, which owns YouTube, have been waging what a lot of people call war against right-of-center speech. For example, there is a YouTuber, Black Pigeon Speaks, who has now been deplatformed, along with Steven Crowder, the comedian. I think he works with Glenn Beck on The Blaze or something. But anyway, Steven Crowder, he's somewhat funny. He's sometimes funny and he's sometimes not funny, but that's neither here nor there. Steven Crowder is kind of a firebrand and a bomb thrower. Not that I've never been a bomb thrower. On the right side of the political spectrum. He's been deplatformed. He's not allowed to make money off advertising on YouTube. And everybody is up in arms over it because they see it as censorship on the part of YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and all the others. I do not doubt. Let me just put this caveat out there as boldly as I can. I do not doubt for a second that Google, and thus YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter censor conservative, libertarian, right-of-center thought. And the reason I say that and put that caveat out there as censorship is because those people, the Steven Crowders and others, get deplatformed, yet Louis Farrakhan, Richard Spencer, self-avowed Nazi, they're still up on the platforms. So now you have Alex Jones, Steven Crowder, Black Pigeon Speaks, all of these others, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, getting deplatformed so that they can't make money off advertising or subscriptions on these social media platforms. That is, in my opinion, censorship. And I know the first thing that conservatives throw out the first thing that conservatives throw out is those are private companies and they should be able to do what they want. And I don't disagree with that. Let me offer you a parenthetical real quickly. If you believe that those are private companies, Google, Facebook, and YouTube, and they can deplatform anybody they want to, then why can't a baker make the decision to bake or not bake a cake for anybody they want to? Because it is my opinion that if you want to discriminate against somebody, you should be able to do that. Because the marketplace will determine whether or not your discrimination allows you to remain economically viable. Now, I know that's a radical statement and a radical belief for somebody, so let me put it in a little different terminology. What right do I have? What right do you have to go onto anybody's private property to buy their cakes, to buy their clothes, to buy their technology, to buy anything? Well, the answer that everybody throws up is, well, Michael, it's a public accommodation. They've opened a storefront. They have opened themselves up for business. So, and I say, so? Because they've opened up themselves for business, does that give me the right to go onto their property? And does that give them or take away from them their right on whatever basis they want to refuse service to me or to you? And I know the first thing that everybody goes to is, oh my gosh, are you talking about you think people ought to be able to discriminate on the basis of race? Yes, I do. Because if I open a shop and I want to sell clothing, but I'm a white supremacist, or I'm a black supremacist, or I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Jew, or I'm a Buddhist, or a Sikh, or whatever else it is, and I don't want to serve these other people, shouldn't I have the right to do that? Because I'm the one that opened the business. So I'm the one that's taking the risk. So if I develop a reputation, if I'm selling sweatshirts in a storefront and I refuse to sell sweatshirts to Muslims, don't you think at some point Muslims are certainly going to refuse to frequent my store, and people who support Muslims are going to refuse to frequent my store? So I run the risk if I decide that I don't want to sell to Muslims. Well, let's take the most glaring example, race. I don't want to sell sweatshirts to Asians. Oh my God, Michael Brown, what a racist statement to make. Well, wait a minute. Why? Where do we get this idea? I know the idea came from the segregated counters in diners in the 50s and 60s, which is a horrible chapter in our American history. But if I didn't want to serve an Asian, if I didn't want to serve or sell sweatshirts to Asians, don't you think the marketplace would soon almost virtually destroy my business? Don't you think that suddenly the word would get out that I refuse to do X, Y, or Z? And then people could make their own choices. I just find it interesting that we have twisted the concept of somebody who decides to open a retail establishment to sell cakes or to sell sweatshirts or to sell whatever it is. And this terminology of public accommodation, I didn't open that store as a public accommodation. I opened that store because I wanted to sell sweatshirts. And if you come into my store and I don't care whether you are black, Asian, gay, transgender, white, Sikh, Buddhist, Muslim, Jew, I don't care what you are. If you come into my store and you are disruptive, or you smell bad, you stink, you haven't bathed in months, and you're driving away my other business, don't I have the right to ask you to leave? Because I'm the one that put up the capital, got the lease, got the space, paid for the inventory, hired the employees, did all of that. But we have taken the idea of public accommodation. And so we want to say to Twitter and Google and everybody else, why, it's a private company. They can do whatever they want to do. But if I say that about a baker, or I say that very same thing about a sweatshirt store, everybody goes ballistic and says, oh, but you can't discriminate. Well, wait a minute. You just told me that Google sells, what does Google sell besides search? They sell ads, which is going to get to my point. Google sells ads, Google sells eyeballs, and they sell space for me to go put up my podcast. And you guys, not you guys, but other people are saying they're a private company, and if they want to deplatform somebody, that's their right. Okay, well, if that's their right, and they're selling a service, why is it not a right for the baker? Why is it not the same right for the sweatshirt maker? Why do we distinguish between these two? We are philosophically inconsistent. And I think we are philosophically inconsistent because the whole public accommodation concept has become wrapped around race. And I say, fine. If I want to, or somebody wants to discriminate, if somebody wants to open a bar, somebody wants to sell sweatshirts, and they don't want to sell to black people or Asian people or Jews or Muslims, how come they don't have the same right to make that choice, just like people at Google or Facebook or Twitter have the right, according to all conservatives? It's a private company and they can do what they want to do, unless you're baking a cake. This inconsistency drives me nuts. Either we have private property rights, and either it applies to Google and Facebook and the baker and the candlestick maker and the sweatshirt maker and everybody else, or it applies to no one. Let's get some consistency in our thought. Now, let me tell you the truth, what I think is the truth about what's really going on with these social media platforms. Yes, there is, as I said in the caveat, there is some discrimination against conservative thought, conservative speech, conservative belief. I think that goes without saying because Louis Farrakhan is still up on those platforms. But what's really driving it? It's something that nobody talks about, and that's the advertisers. Because the advertisers are the ones that I think are driving the deplatforming. They a Ben & Jerry's or a Warby Parker or, I don't know, Verizon or any of these other, AT&T, the companies that have been taken over, their boards have been taken over, where you have a lot of lefty or Marxists on the boards of these publicly traded companies, are saying we don't want our advertising dollars on a conservative YouTuber's platform. We don't want our advertising on Michael Brown Unplugged podcast. Well, that's their right. They get to choose where they spend their dollars. So I think this deplatforming, if we really dug into it and got past the censorship which blinds us, we would see that these are private companies that are more likely than not actually responding to advertising pressure, not self-imposed internal pressure, although I do believe there is inherently internal bias against conservatism. I think there's a lot more about advertising dollars that nobody's talking about. Now, why do I believe that? Because there is a great battle going on between advertisers that advertise in traditional media, the networks, cable news, what few newspapers are left, versus those same advertisers that are putting dollars into social media and digital advertising. There's a huge battle for those dollars. So the advertisers get to drive that car. The advertisers get to decide, we don't want to be on conservative stuff on your platform. Okay, we'll deplatform them. We'll make sure that, your ad to sell a phone or to sell a car or to sell a sweatshirt or whatever else doesn't appear. And in fact, we'll go even further. We'll deplatform that guy so we don't have to run the risk that the algorithm might miss that and your advertising pops up on an Alex Jones YouTube channel. We'll just take Alex Jones off. Problem solved. Nobody wants to talk about that. The advertising dollars. So I just want to leave you with this. If you make the argument that Google, Twitter, Facebook are private companies and they can censor and they can choose who gets to use their platforms or not, then explain to me why that same logic doesn't apply to the guy that owns the bake shop or that owns the sweatshirt shop or that owns the restaurant or that owns any other thing that if I were to just call it a private company, you would say, well, yeah, it's like Google. And they can do whatever they want because it's a private company. I sometimes think those of us on the right, as I said yesterday in my conversation about courage, we're afraid to really address the real principles involved. And the real principles involved are, if you believe that Google is a private company and they can discriminate against conservative thought, then why can't the bake shop discriminate and choose who they want to sell cakes to? Think about that. Thanks for listening to this Friday edition of Michael Brown Unplugged. I really do appreciate it. And I appreciate all of you who joined in last night on our little town hall. That was fun. Be sure and subscribe to us on iTunes. iTunes, just search for Michael Brown Unplugged. I appreciate the reviews. We've got like 47 reviews or so. Keep it up. All the reviews help. The other thing I would ask, again, I'm doing this thing with iHeart and I can't quite figure it out, but I really do want to get on the iHeart app just because I want to spread this podcast as far and wide as I can. So if you are on Spreaker and you listen to the podcast on Spreaker, all you have to do is click on an episode. And on the episode over on the right side, it will show me as the author of that episode. And then underneath there is a grayed out box that says follow. If you click that follow button, it will turn yellow and will show that you are following. Because the unwritten rule that I hear about, which I haven't been able to validate, is that you need at least 100 followers on Spreaker for iHeart to accept your podcast. Maybe true or not true, but I'm trying to get as much of above 100 as I can, and you guys have been helpful doing it, and I greatly appreciate that. And of course, as you know, if you want to follow me on social media, I haven't been deplatformed yet. All you have to do is go to michaelbrowntoday.com. michaelbrowntoday.com, and on the website, there is where you can listen on Spreaker, so you can follow there too. And then across the bottom are all the icons for YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/MichaelBrownToday. Follow me on Twitter @MichaelBrownUSA. Follow me on Facebook, facebook.com/MichaelDBrown. And by the way, if you missed last night's town hall, you needed to be a member of our private discussion group on the Michael Brown show page. So you need to ask to join the group. And of course, unless you're a troll, we'll let you into the group. And that way you can get notices of the town halls and that sort of thing. So like the Facebook page, but then be sure and click over here on the blue button where it says join group. Click that, your name pops up, and then either Steve or myself will check you out. We won't let like the guy that has me blocked that keeps telling me I'm not blocked. And thanks to Agent Jed A and a few others who told me exactly who that guy was. Long story. You can see the arguments going on Facebook. I couldn't tell who he was, and I don't know why I engaged anyway. Anyway, bottom line, thanks for listening this week. The numbers are good. I greatly appreciate it. I've seen some of the tweets about me not being on radio. Who knows? Maybe somewhere, somehow, someday, somewhere in a universe far, far away, I'll appear back on radio again. I love radio and I would love to be back, but who knows? We don't know what's in the cards, and we'll just see what happens. I enjoy doing the podcast. I got a great new project with the Homeland Security Group. Lots of things going on, so I really have no complaints. Again, thanks for listening all week, and I'll talk to you again Monday morning.